You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. We thank them very much. I am your host, Lucas Kaplan of NetsDaily, where I cover the team, and of Nets Film Focus, where we make great, insightful videos about Brooklyn Nets basketball. And of course, alongside me, as always, is Sarah Kustok, woman of many talents and ventures, including just returning from Miami for where she covered Unrivaled. How was that?
It was fun, extraordinary experience. I will get to do that at times throughout the course of the year, despite being sad, missing all of you in the Nets and in some of these games and moments. But yeah, it is really special to watch the tweaks and the adjustments and the talent of these women because it was on display. And I got a little bit of sunshine, Lucas. So I'm never gonna be mad at that.
Yeah, you missed not the worst weather, but being in Miami certainly seems like a step up from New York City in terms of January weather. And yeah, Unrivaled, pretty cool on TV. And, anytime you get the best basketball players in the world and you just put them out there, how bad can it be? Is my not super in-depth takeaway from that. One of the moments, probably the moment that unfortunately you were not in Brooklyn for, was Vince Carter's jersey retirement. And, we talked about him last week on the podcast, but just being there for the moment, I didn't know what the Nets had in store. It was just a fantastic weekend, honestly. They premiered From Daytona Beach to Brooklyn. Vince Carter focused documentary on his journey. He lit up the Empire State Building in classic red, white, and blue New Jersey Nets colors. And then, of course, Saturday, Brooklyn's game against the Miami Heat, he gets his jersey retired, and the halftime ceremony just feels like the Nets, which just was so well done. What I wrote about it, few people have loved being a Net and representing the organization more than Vince Carter. And that's the type of guy he is. And it felt like the love was reciprocated back to him from the organization, from the fans. I saw so many throwback jerseys in the crowd. And it just made me want to ask you, because we heard from his former teammates, guys I grew up loving and rooting for. I did not expect to see Bosjan Nakbar and Devin Harris, and I got a little starstruck, all these guys. But they all speak about Vince Carter, the teammate, the person, the smile. Ian Eagle spoke about that. Lawrence Frank. Everybody seems to have this common refrain. And so I'm just wondering from your perspective, in the documentary, they talk about this new phase of his career as a broadcaster back with the Nets. What is he like as a teammate from your perspective?
Extraordinary, as you would imagine. The best of the best. Let me first start by saying it was a very challenging decision for me to unfortunately not be there and have other work obligations. However, what I will say is, to your point, everything about Vince is top notch, first class. He is a pro of a pro. So I think in return, what the Nets were able to do to honor him was so special. And leading up to those weeks, not only talked to Vince and not only, of course, congratulated him and everything that was going about it, as he is an excellent and just extraordinary teammate, as we will get into, but talked with Devin Harris, of course, Richard Jefferson. Like, Devin Harris gave me his whole run. I should have asked him to come on the pod with us because of the enthusiasm. Talked with Jay Kidd, who couldn't be there, and was asking Jay about just different things. Same, I know Ian Eagle, of course, did an extraordinary job. I got to watch everything, the halftime ceremony, everything leading up to it. But I think that was the part that, Rich just being so bummed he couldn't be there longer, but was able to at least get in for the night for Thursday. Devin there for the whole time. And he was just blown away by how extraordinary it was and wanting to be there to honor Vince. Again, same deal to Jay on the scoreboard, at least being able to leave a message. I think there's so much love and respect for who he was and understanding the magnitude of this moment and what it means. And for us, every time we step into Barclays Center to see that jersey hanging in the rafters, that means something. But it was more about the entirety of the weekend that I know you can speak to because you were there, that just felt so perfect. And that's what Vince deserves. Now seeing, I talked about it in the pod last week, I think it's been such a beautiful progression of who he was as a player, the career that he had, how he honored and paid tribute to the game with the way he finished it, lifting others up, the next generation of young players, teaching and talking and caring for and pouring in that support, and now doing the same thing as a broadcaster. And I think for all of us, just
Mhm.
hearing those experiences, listening to his stories, how much he wants to excel at this new phase in his career, and what it means to be around him. And I think we all see that and we experience it. But that is such a beautiful trait to be able to carry that of no matter what chapter you are in your professional life, or life in general, to be able to give that. And I think too, just seeing that with his son being the ball boy and him
Hmm.
talking about the importance of that and his family and the kids being so close with Dr. J, like all of those things continue to me to show how special the game of basketball is. And I think sport is because it transcends what you're watching on the court. It really is something that we are able to feel in life. And so I think for all of that, it just felt like such an extraordinarily special weekend that truly did justice to the player and the person that he is.
Yeah, I've, witnessed it for the first time in person. He just had I did not want to be Vince Carter for most of the weekend in terms of all of the obligations he had to do. Having your jersey retired
Oh
is
no,
great.
Lucas, if given the opportunity.
If I'm not saying I would reject it, but man, he was a busy guy. He just had so many photo ops and interviews and not being pushed and pulled, but kind of going in so many different directions. And on Friday, I got to talk to him and write up an interview for NetsDaily, and it was like I was like last in line, and I was like, oh man, he's talked to like 30 people just this morning and this and that. And he was just so gracious and had a smile. And I was asking him, kind of introspective questions about his career. And he was just so thoughtful and warm and genuine in his responses. And it was pretty shocking. It was just, you could tell, you were in the midst of a pretty special person. And therefore, it's so fitting that Vince was the centerpiece of this great night for the Nets. I mean, you think about their historical relationship with Julius Erving, for him to come back and embrace the Nets family and talk to the crowd and talk to his former teammates. That's a big deal for many Nets fans. And the fact that Vince was the catalyst for it is just, you couldn't be
Yes.
more fitting, as I said. Loved being a Net, loves being part of the Nets family still. The organization, the fans feel the same way. And so for him to be around all of that, a special night, and to, of course, in classic Vince fashion, not just make it about him is, you'd expect nothing less. With that, the Nets also played basketball over the last week. They had 4 games at home against the Knicks, Suns. Kevin Durant made his second return to the Barclays Center. Heat and Sacramento. And it was unfortunately a winless week for the Nets, but that definitely doesn't capture the whole of it. I'm wondering what just general takeaways you might have seen from Miami. I know you were locked in watching film on the road per usual. So what did you kind of grasp from your viewings?
I think as we continue to watch this team and do so with some missing pieces and parts, there's always throughout the course and stretches of these games that there's flashes of optimism, things to pull from it, those that you like, layers of foundation to build from, and then a lot of areas where you look at the group and the team and how they perform that needs to get better. And I think it was the same type of balance of that and some of the same issues that I think at times you can understand. You look at the issues of turnovers, for example, most recent game against Sacramento, and how it was at bay for the most part in the first half. And then that was a vulnerability in the second half and allowed for the game to get opened up. What was happening in the post and some of the post play? There are certain characteristics of this team that they are mindful of and they do a good job, and then at some point it turns. And sometimes that can be the depth or talent on the floor of the opponent, and at other times I think it's just the continued learning process. But I think overall, you are seeing, we do on this, and I know we will on this podcast every week, thanks to you, Lucas, the next net or Brooklyn's. And I think that is such an important trait of, okay, what are we seeing in certain players that it may be more consistency, but is there opportunities that it would be something that would translate in the future? And not necessarily even just for the Nets, but a lot of these players that we're watching are trying to really make it in the league and cut their teeth
Right.
in the league. And I think you're seeing flashes of that, and then just becomes a question of, okay, how can you put that all together at the same time to translate that into a win? And so I think, again, overall, some tough losses. I think the toughest of all of those, that Knicks game, uh, no question. And so it's hard to keep circling back to, but man, that's a team that's looking to compete for the Eastern Conference Championship. That's a team that's looking, and they had pretty much all of their pieces, and the Nets take them down to the wire, unable to close that out. But I think some of those things we need to take a step back in a larger view and realize that there are strides being made, but it's just harder to evaluate when it's the losses that keep stacking it.
I totally agree. I'm sit on media row. I'm supposed to be impartial. I am impartial, but I wanted that Knicks win. I grew up a Nets fan. I grew up in Manhattan. I grew up a Nets fan. I want those wins. But obviously, in the bigger picture, that was a really strong game for the group. That was the only game this week where D'Angelo Russell and Cam Johnson played, and the last time that happened, they hung 132 on the Portland Trail Blazers. When this team is healthy, or no team in the NBA at this point of the year is fully healthy, but man, the Nets are, if they could get even halfway healthy, it's just unfortunate. They would probably have an easier time getting buckets. And I think because of the kind of rotating door of available players and some of the health issues, it kind of compounds these things, that you're talking about, whether it's turnovers stabilizing for 3.5 quarters and then having 5 in a 6-minute stretch, or whether they're cleaning up the paint and the glass and then they give up, again, 5 offensive rebounds in half a quarter. When offense is harder to come by, those mistakes or just stretches, natural stretches in a game, feel like death blows. And I will say it didn't happen in every game. They really had a chance the whole way against the Knicks. They really played well, I thought, for most of the Sacramento game. If they just shot 10 of 36 from 3, they're league average in 3-point shooting. They make 4 or 5 more. It's right down to the wire, and they are playing well, especially on the defensive end. I would like to point out. So they had an 112 defensive rating over this past week. That's around top 10-ish mark in the NBA if you were to extrapolate it. They are cleaning up the glass really well. Again, I've said this a few times on this podcast, but those early season issues with fouling, all that stuff, they are preventing free throws, they are rebounding, they are being physical without all that stuff. And so you can see the long-term growth of the group, and then the long-term growth of individuals. It's not linear. Tosan Evbuomwan comes on the scene, for example, and has a bunch of great games. He's probably not going to shoot 65-70% for the whole year. And in a game where the Nets were the most depleted and he's like the primary ball handler, he shoots 2 of 15. And, that stuff is going to happen. And it's all about how you respond from that. And then I thought in the last game of the week against Sacramento, he played really well. Let me pull up the box score right now, because I remember he just had a bunch of nice takes. He shot 5 of 10,
Yeah, you
15
got it.
points, 8 boards. Yeah, and just the flashes. You can see him using his physicality, his length, his footwork on drives, all that stuff. So we talked about this at the very beginning of the season, what we're going to look for, this season, what this season's going to be about. And it's tougher to keep the big picture in mind sometimes if you go 0-4 in a week. That's understandable. The NBA is about winning. But it's also about the big picture, and I think we are still on track, in my opinion at least.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say on that is it's where I feel for Jordy Fernandez, the coaching staff, the players, like keeping an eye and a focus on that when it is about losses, because you could feel ways as fans and for those of us covering the team, but it is all about these individuals do not get to this level without having a just absolutely despising losing, understanding the importance of feeling a win. So I think continuing to string together these type of effort, the showcasing of what they're doing on the floor, to me is so impressive because that's hard to keep showing up with the same energy, the same focus, the same mentality, the same in ways positivity when it is losses stacking up. And I give so much credit and I'm so impressed by this group with how they have played together and stuck together. The way that they do still feel like there is a chemistry, a vibe, rooting for one another, the way the bench looks, all of those things are still present. Uh, and it's things that you hope for and expect, but I think that's easier said than done. And we're continuing to see that play out. And so for as much as we can talk about big picture, for this is their careers, this is their livelihood, this is
Mhm.
their profession, this is their day-to-day. They are the ones pouring in the work and the sweat. And so it is not about big picture, man. It's about the next game, the next play, the next thing that they're having to do. And I am just so impressed with how they continue to show up with that mentality of purpose and intensity each and every day. And that's what I've loved to watch and see about them, despite the way the win-loss record looks right now.
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing that up because that really should be what we lead with. This team plays very hard, and with that, that's something Nets fans, the players themselves, the coaching staff can be proud of. And Jordy has done a good job emphasizing that and talking about how he's proud of how the team has done just that. And it's funny, Vince Carter in his pregame press conference mentioned that he has been proud of the team and stoked that they keep showing up and playing hard. And that's really what it's all about. In terms of short-term injury news, I know we've been talking about it a lot. Jordy Fernandez gave updates on really all four Nets that are around a return to play possibly before the Sacramento game. And we got some really good news on Cam Thomas and Trendon Watford specifically. Cam Thomas, he said that there will be a scan for his hamstring on Wednesday and then a timeline to return to play. We're recording this Wednesday morning. By the time we finish recording, there might be a Cam Thomas update. So that is good news. On Trendon Watford, also dealing with a hammy, Jordy said he looks great and he's been working hard, and we'll see him back within the next week. So we don't know what game yet, but trending around the corner. And then Cam Johnson, dealing with an ankle sprain. He's going to get reevaluated in next week. So that's another couple games. And then Ben Simmons, he's been sick, which was unfortunate, and he's just listed as day-to-day with a back. So there's definitely optimism that the Nets get healthier within even, 2 or 3 games and they have a more full complement of players. But with that being said, the players that are on the court, who would you like to give your Brooklyn's Finest award of the week to?
I would like to give my Brooklyn's finest to Day'Ron Sharpe.
Mm,
I think there's so many areas of growth still for Day'Ron, but I think it's important to remember that the injury in training camp and what that took them when he finally did return at the start of a season. For as much as people come back and they may be 100, as Jordy says, 200% healthy, there's still a acclimation process or reacclimation, I should say, speed of the game action, all of those things. I think it took him a little while. And I do still think there are so many areas that you'd like to see steps. But I say all that to say that I think we've seen a ton of growth from him. And what you expect out of him is always rebounding. A lot of rebounding in the offensive end. He's done that. He has a knack for that. I think he had said that at some point. I think our Megan Triplet on the Nets on Yes had asked him about offensive rebounding. He's like, it's just what I do. I got no answers. This is what I do. But I do think in so many ways, the angles, the positioning, that's instinctual to him. And that's something you can't always teach with a player, despite their size. But defensively, and Lucas, I know you deep dove into this because you were asking him the questions and you wrote articles on this and did a breakdown, but there are visible difference on the defensive side. And I
mhm.
think sometimes you do see breakdowns or out of position or areas that, again, there's still areas for growth. But I think overall, what you want to see out of him in the jump of what Jordi Fernandez is asking this defense to do. He's done a really nice job in trying to make those strides. For all of those things, I think there's credit that goes into the work that he's put in and just the ways that he has performed when the Nets have been shorthanded and have been needing more of a presence in the post.
Yep, and he played his season high in minutes against the Kings, and he won his minutes yet again. That's all he seems to do off the bench. You know, you can trust him to anchor a bench unit and give you good minutes. 12 and 10 in, still just 23 minutes. So it's not like he's playing a ton, but even then he's still putting up, strong numbers, 3 steals. And it really is the defense that has popped. I mean, if you can think back, 2-3 years ago at the beginning of Day'Ron's career, the question very much was, can he be the anchor of strong defensive lineups down low? Is his positioning, verticality, fouling, is all of that going to get to an NBA level? And, that's not disrespect. He was a late first-round pick. You're not always sure, you're going to find a bona fide NBA rotation player at those type of draft slots. Obviously, Day'Ron had things he needed to work on. The defense has gotten better every year, and this year I think it's just clearly at, his peak. And I think the stat that really illustrates that is foul rate. As a big, sometimes you have to sacrifice a little bit of the shot blocking, for the fouling. And per cleaning the glass, right, his block rate is down a little bit. It's closer to league average for big men. It was actually, above that his last couple of years. But the foul rate has jumped from 6th percentile his rookie year, 8th percentile, 8th percentile, to now 50th percentile. That's a huge jump.
That
and you can
is.
see it in his film. The way he goes vertical, the way he seems better at like tracking the ball. He had a great block on a lefty layup from, I want to say, Malik Monk against the Sacramento Kings, where he jumped, floated in the air, and had to wait midair until Malik extended the ball, to go lay it up, and he swatted it. That's great stuff, and it goes such a long way for Day'Ron's NBA career. So, I'm really happy for him, because that is, for bench bigs, even if he becomes a starting big in the future, that is just such a massive area of improvement for him. And then it's just all the mobility stuff, the positioning. He's taking away cutters. He's stealing the ball more. His deflections are up. So I'm really glad that you picked Day'Ron. And I was going to pick, he was one of my options. And it's not even just about the last week for him. It's about even longer, and he really did shine this past week. But just thinking about him, I'm really happy over these past couple years of development. And like you said, he did not have an easy road to getting better this year. He's hurt at the beginning of the year, kind of just dealing with stuff. He's coming off the bench. He's trying to get a flow, and he really has. And like you said, I liked his answer to Megan Triplett about offensive rebounding and battling with Domantas Sabonis, who's not easy to battle with. He wasn't even, Day'Ron's not trying to be cool. He's not too cool to give good answers. He's not, anything like that. But she asked, what is it about your offensive rebounding? And he was genuinely stumped. He was like, I don't know. I just do this. And it's hard to argue with him. If you want more percentiles, offensive rebounding the first 4 years of his career among big men: 100th percentile, 99th percentile, 97th percentile, 98th percentile per cleaning the glass.
Hey, that's big.
Tells you all you need to know. He has 3 games this year already with at least 8 offensive rebounds, and he's playing 20 minutes off the bench. So, again, love to watch Day'Ron and love that he's getting better. My Brooklyn's finest, I got to give it to D'Angelo Russell. He's just been, to get traded midseason and to organize the offense. We're going to have some fun trivia even about him in a couple minutes. That's how good he's been. Transition, I've written about it a lot. His hit-ahead passes, reading the open floor. At the end of the shot clock, you can give him the ball and get good offense, which I think is something the Nets were missing after they traded Dennis Schroeder and before they got D'Lo. I'm assuming you've noticed the same things. Nothing too complicated.
No, and I think we've talked about him a lot That's it. And I also I think
Hmm.
that's the
Hmm.
biggest improvement, the sharpness of his passing, just taking care of all of those things since we had him last in Brooklyn. The jump that's made has been so
Yeah,
fun to see, and when he's on the floor, it makes such a huge difference.
absolutely. We've talked about him a lot. I don't think there's anything else to say. He's just organizing, leading the offense, half court transition, and he's doing it well. Um, that brings us to the next net. So long view, short view, some one specific skill, whole package. Who are you looking at? What next
I
net
may
do you
have
have
picked
your
him
eye on?
already. You may have picked him already. I already alluded to it. It's Tosan Awoma
Hmm.
is to me, as you said it. He came on so strong, opened up so many eyes. I think a lot of people didn't necessarily understand and recognize just the skill set that he might bring to the table. And as we've watched him, there have been and there will be ebbs and flows for all players, and especially too just with NBA teams even being more comfortable scouting him
Hmm.
and knowing who's in and out. And okay, he's someone we need to maybe bump up on our scouting report. And so
Hmm.
players have better idea for tendency and feel. So with all that being said, I think he is the guy that I want to continue to watch and to monitor and see what it looks like as the sample size grows.
I know the Kings wish they bumped him up on the scouting report because he came in and scored 9 points in like 3 minutes, and they had to call the timeout. But yeah, that's what he has to do. I am looking to see if he can kind of drive to pass a little bit more. It's like we see that the scoring is there, and we see him make some like really high level passes in terms of placement and like throwing passes with his left hand and all that. I think if he leans even more into being a point forward or just shows off a little bit more of the passing, that'll be great for his game. Um, I did have the same one, but in the interest of, keeping things diverse, I will go with Keon Johnson. I feel like we haven't talked about him in a little bit on NextNet. I feel like he's figured out a lot of stuff in terms of his driving game, even though the 3-point shot has kind of regressed a little bit over the season. Hopefully that will bump back up, that ebbs and flows. But his points on, drives per drive has gone up. It feels like he's figured out how to get to 2 feet and be that awesome athlete that he is. When he's going off 1 foot, he's kind of got the decel down. And so he's had these games where he scores, 20 something points, even though he might go 1 of 5 from 3 or 0 of 4 from 3. Keeping consistent production as the shot, as literally happens for every player, waivers. I'm really happy to see that from him. And, this is a guy, again, 2-way contract last year. Not sure if he's an NBA player, having 20-point games, getting out in transition, finishing. So all of that stuff just becoming a little bit more consistent for Keon Johnson. What are your just quick impressions of him? Really, the first year of his NBA career, he's getting like rotation minutes every night, ball in his hands, expectations.
Yeah, I think the athleticism jumps through the roof initially and just pops out as you
Hmm.
watch him. But I do think the understanding of the nuances of the game, the level of efficiency, how he can best raise the level of play for his teammates, I think all those things you've watched a steady improvement. And for a player like him, and Jordy always brings it up that he's still young. And so, despite the fact that he's been in the league for a while, and you think about him, he's still learning all of those things. And I think it's been a great opportunity for him to have time, know he has a run throughout the course of the game, and so how he adjusts to that, or even just end the game situations, all of those things, um, to me have been impressive to watch and continuing to monitor what that looks like as the season goes on.
Definitely. And, you saw it this week. He kind of struggled a little bit against the Knicks, 7 points, comes back with 20 points against Phoenix, 9 of 16 shooting, 22 points against Miami, getting to the line, getting to the rim. So, again, with all these guys, NBA players are so good. Everybody can go off. It's all about the consistency. We hear it all the time. Separates good from the great. And speaking of great, we will close with some trivia. And it's an opportunity for me to circle back to D'Angelo Russell, who has just been really awesome as a floor general for the Nets. I mean, the Nets have needed him. Their offense especially as Cam Johnson and Ben Simmons kind of deal with injuries and are in and out of the lineup. D'Lo's been such a stabilizing force, dealing with zone injuries too. But, when he plays, their offense really takes a jump. And in fact, small sample size alert, he has on assists, per 100 possessions above 14 and a half. That would be the all-time mark in Nets history for a single season. Again, he's only played 9 games. His assist percentage, what percentage of buckets he's assisted on when he's on the floor is over 50%. That's only been done 16, 17 times in NBA history. So I will ask you, who and maybe when has the greatest assist season in NBA history? We'll go, assists per 100 possessions. So assists per possession. Who's dishing the ball literally the most in Nets history for a single season?
Can you give me an iteration of an era?
I feel like that'll give it away, and I almost feel like that gives it away. It's not. It's. It's.
Is it someone I wouldn't anticipate?
No, you would probably anticipate them.
Darren Williams?
Darren Williams, great answer, has the record for assist percentage, which I mentioned in that single season history. In 2012, 47% assist percentage. Assist per possession is Jason Kidd in 2002.
Oh,
I know. I was surprised you didn't immediately
honestly,
say that.
I was yeah, you would have been.
But I'm really glad you got the tougher one, because you would assume, Jason Kidd has all these assist
really.
records.
You told me it was obvious, so I should have thought of the other jersey that's hanging in the rafters.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah, at the era. But yeah, just to give some context as to how, firmly D'Lo has taken the reins of this offense. And, over this next week, the Nets get on the road. Later today, they're in Charlotte, go to Houston. They come back, play Houston again. So those are the 3 games we'll be talking about this time next week. Sarah, any parting words?
Nope. Have a great rest of the week. And, just excited to see how things continue to unfold.
Have a great rest of the week, everybody. Hashtag VC forever. Number 15 up in the rafters. Obviously the number I had to wear, middle school, high school, all that. So what a great week in Nets world. And we will be back here next week on The Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented to you by Ticketmaster. Like, rate, subscribe, all that jazz. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next Wednesday.